In yesterday's video, we were introduced to the Bone Splitters, an incredibly manic classification of orcs, trapped in the throes of a perpetual war or battle frenzy. They are the outcasts of their kind, considered strange, muttering to themselves, usually hyper-aggressive and just generally odd. Over time, they are pulled away from their orc clans, drawn to the teachings of the Gob prophets, these mystical speakers who form the mythos of the Bone Splitters and direct them in the will and power of Gorkamorka. They don't lead so much as direct the Bone Splitters, seeing the spirit of Gorkamorka as a great hunter residing in the bones of the biggest beasts of the realms. And as a group, the Bone Splitters travel all corners of the realms hunting their prey, the biggest quarry that's out there, freeing the untamable spirit of Gorkamorka. But here's the thing. These are all a bunch of raving lunatics bereft of order, hierarchy, and structure. So how do they stay together, organized, and keep going from one goal to another? Well, in today's video, that's exactly what we're going to explore. How this army of mad orcs fits together to create one of the deadliest forces in the realms. And it's exactly how I want to frame this. We're going to describe the various groups that the orcs fall into and talk about the leadership, but at the end of the day, when you step back and look at the faction as a whole, it's collectively described as like a force of nature, the same way you describe the very beasts that they hunt, right? This impersonal, uncontrollable, unforeseeable, and possibly unstoppable force, like an avalanche, a hurricane, a stampede. So even though the nitty-gritty of organization exists, it has to be shaded with that kind of tone that when you see it, it just looks like utter madness. So how do the forces of the Bone Splitter organize themselves? Well, there are several units, all with different abilities and temperaments, but the strength from any army comes from the Rucks, Ruck being R-U-K-K. Part iconography and part military structure, the Rucks divide the Bone Splitters into the various roles that make them act as a single army. And I'll go over each of the Rucks and the units in them. Keep in mind, the deep dive into units starts tomorrow, so after that, we'll talk about the iconography and why it's cool. One other note before we start jumping in the Rucks is that they can range in size from war clan to war clan. So for example, one of the Rucks might be just a few orc boys to several thousand making up a green wave, whereas in a different war clan, well, they have different types of units, so theirs can be very small compared to somebody else's very large Ruck. So again, there's a whole lot of diversity in how you shape your war clan here, but this is the basic structure that they all have. We start off with the Cop Ruck, considered the head of the beast. That's the iconography term. Again, put your pin in that, we'll come back to it later. These are the boys with the strongest connection to the Wa, or produce the most Wa energy for their leaders. They act as living funnels of its might and power, made up of war docs and more boys. So if you want to think about it, this can roughly be considered the quote-unquote elites of the Bone Splitter army and form the solid core that everything else is built around. Right next to them are the Teef Rucks, T-E-E-F, and this is made up of a single unit. That is the Big Stabba, those orcs that carry those huge sharpened rocks on sticks and act almost like battering rams, colossal arrows if you will. The iconography term is that they form the teeth of the beast, often seen moving in tandem with the Cop Ruck, and this is the sharpened fangs of the army meant to bite into the thickest of hides. Now, each war clan, no matter how big or small, has two what are called Gob Rucks. These form the jaws of the beast. That's the iconography term. It's a catch-all name for the main fighting body, right? Like an infantry division, think of it that way. They also represent the dual nature of Gorkamorka. These two Gob Rucks, one is called the Brutal Ruck, which channels the spirit and aggression of Gork, right? All about melee, get up there and punch him in the face. They want to be up in the battle as fast as possible. It's melee time all the time. And the other Gob Ruck is called the Cunning Ruck. And this is the prime space for arrow boys, raining fire into the enemy. And this takes after the cunning aspect of Mork. They don't need to punch the beast to bring it down. They can do so playing smarter from further away with an arrow. Now, both of these Rucks are full of boys. These, like I said, the main infantry body. And they will collectively, as such, make up the vast bulk of any army. The Brutal Ruck also uses a few Boar Riders, and of course the Cunning Ruck uses Arrow Boys. Both of those rucks are led by a savage big boss, and they really are meant to channel the aspects of their respective ruck. So you have the Brutal Ruck with a savage big boss who acts a lot like Gork is the best and no one can beat Gork, and then on the other side you have the Cunning Ruck with a savage big boss who's like, no, Mork is the best, no one can beat Mork. And on a practical level, these make great military formations, right? You have melee support and range support, brutal and cunning, just like the orcs should be. And they work in tandem to bring down massive prey. But they also serve another purpose, and that is to keep each other sharp. They are constantly fighting against one another and also just trying to one-up each other by acts of violence to prove the superiority of their specific, deity or, I guess, way of doing combat. It's a competition that can devolve into all-out war if there's nothing else to hunt, but generally it acts as this friendly competition to keep them both fighting at their very best. Okay, so we got the Cop Ruck, the Tooth Ruck, the two Gob Rucks, the Brutal and Cunning, and there's one more, and that is the Snag Ruck. And these are known as the Horns of the Beast, led by a maniac Weird Knob, and it's filled to the brim with Boar Boy maniacs. These act as the heavy cavalry of the army, using their high mobility to flank the enemy and cut off retreats, or just be the first to smash into them. High speed and autonomy on the battlefield is kind of the name of the game here. And so those are all of the rucks, but for each of them I mentioned that they represent something very specific, right? There's head, teeth, jaws, right? The two Gob Rucks are the jaws, and then the horns. Well, what does all that mean? When the Wa is at full height and the frenzy of war takes a hold of one of these war clans, this colossal mob of insane and broken orcs becomes something else. I mentioned before that they become a force of nature. All of a sudden, the Wurgog Prophet exudes will and power and channels all of their energy into a single mind. They act as a unified force and become a monster themselves. If we were to look at this as a picture, like on its side, we would see that the head acts as the core of an army from which everything else branches out, just like the Cop Ruck acts as the main elite fighting body. The jaws, meaning the two Gob Rucks, Brutal and Cunning, close in on the prey. The teeth bite deep into it, those big stabbers go straight for the kill, piercing the hardest armor. And the horns outside the battle are free to wrap around from a flank, and that's how the cavalry works. This is the kind of iconography I meant, that Gorka Morka is the alpha predator of the realms, the hunter who cannot be tamed. And as an expression of worship and devotion and sort of mimicking him, his children take on that same aspect. That when they are in full battle mode, the Bone Splitters are the great beast. They are the great predator and the alpha monster of the realms. And if you paid close attention, you know there's one thing that I didn't mention when I was listing off the different rucks and the units in them, and that is I never mentioned the Wurgog Prophet. You see, he doesn't fit into any one of the rucks. He instead stands alone, guiding the spirit of the wall, acting as the soul and brain of this singular beast that is the entire war clan taking on different aspects. It's his will that sees the mantic energy turn into devastating lightning or manifestations of Gorka Morka appearing on this killing floor, and turns this rabble of maniacs into a singular, all-consuming beast. Now, why is this cool? Well, there's a few things here. I love whenever we talk about factions that are notably disorganized, talking about their organization. Or for Flesh Eater Courts, it's a lot of fun too, where it's like you can just make up whatever ranks and hierarchies that you want. It's a lot of fun space to explore. And with the Iron Jaws, it was a lot of fun because everything is in digits of 4 because that's all they can count to. Stuff like that. I love those kinds of things where it's just kind of out there, wild. How do you make an organized structure out of a disorganized faction? And this is no different, where what do you, as far as like when you get caught up in the power of the wall, how do you like to fight? Okay, there's a ruck for that, right? If you like being cunning, like Mork, there's a ruck for you. If you just want to go punch something as hard as you can, there's a ruck for you. Do you like speed? There's one for you too. You know what I mean? Like, do you get the thrill of satisfaction of like just devastating the most well-armored target in the enemy army? Join the Tooth Ruck. And so I love the fact that like, not only on a practical level is it just dividing everyone into their strengths and interests, but then the way that the Wargog Prophet becomes the sole mind of a massive, massive horde that just is a green sea, and then uses everyone's strengths and their excitement and their enthusiasm, channels it into devastating magics, but then just gives it a singular mind, almost a hive mind, not quite. He doesn't like see through their eyes or anything like that, but he orchestrates them in a way that you would think, oh, that's acting as a singular consciousness. They become the great beast. And I think that is just deeply fascinating, that they are all kind of broken and their minds are all fractured normally, but man, when there is a battle, they snap into place like a bunch of Legos coming into something bigger than themselves, in a way that other orcs just don't. And for those reasons, I think that Bone Splitters are incredibly unique, the way that they quote-unquote organize themselves. And starting tomorrow, we're going to start diving into the various units. There's only 2 videos for them, the leaders and then everybody else. There's not a whole lot of units in the book, but they kind of, like I said, go together in very unique and interesting ways, and the way we explore that as we look at the individual units is really going to show it. So friends, thank you so much for watching, and look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's video. Let me know if you're a Bone Splitters player. I loved the army when I had it and actually tried to get another one back. We'll see if that pans out, but yeah, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I'd love to chat with you. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.